make it look pretty.
Sure.
Okay, well, let me see here then. So,
The hell, stay up.
payroll 2,559. Does that sound about right?
For monthly?
Heading within the most recent month. Okay. So, with that, what did you spend? What was your number? 2,559 came in. What did you spend?
No idea.
So, all this stuff, people, which is interesting because we've been asking it for a while. So, what do you think you spent?
Well, I know that it's about on rent and utilities. So,
This one's expensive.
what is it? 40 most of the time? 1,234 is like the average, I want to say.
Wow. Why not less than 20% of that?
So I was really focused on finding somewhere and
When? So, what?
because I was living in a house, renting a house with my ex-husband, and our lease was up in December.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going
This is last year.
during the last year.
What was so rushed about it? Was it sketch? Or like, what was happening?
It was new, and I couldn't afford to pay for the house alone.
Well, this is going to go regardless. Because when you guys know you're renting things. Because you said it ended in September. Well, December. So you have a month about. Okay. And the fire department's in a month. You look like you increase it. Like, this is some. I'm sure like this race isn't enforced or anything, but I found many rents for myself within a month's time, a few weeks' time. You know, I thought you were talking like a week because that would be rushed, but
It was,
the application process is usually pretty damn quick. And
it was, but at the same time,
this month is probably going to describe Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2. It's a callback to better times driven the games industry, I would say about a decade or so ago, in which we had a lot of experiences like this that leaned into just being a fun shooter experience that you really can put the controller down, come back to later on. You're not forced into this giant overall experience that's been worked on for about a decade with hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars invested into the project with live service ambitions that span maybe a decade or so. That seems like every single project that we've been talking about on this channel endlessly in terms of their eventual failures. And it feels like a lot of those experiences are driven by market research. But Warhammer really leans into the identity of what people wanted from a Space Marine sequel, and it honestly is just a really fun time. And I cannot understate that enough. But if you actually check the Steam reviews for this game, it is very positive right now, about 80% with 50,000 plus reviews. On OpenCritic, it is pretty much the same story from critics overall. 82 top critic average with 86% of critics recommending the experience. Some of the top outlets, such as Eurogamer, saying Space Marine 2's campaign is spectacular and most thrilling follow-up to the original, but the game's grisly combat shines best in its cooperative operations mode. And then we saw GameRant giving it 4 out of 5, saying even without knowing the lore around Warhammer 40k, Space Marine 2 does a good job inviting new fans in the franchise by showing the unwavering courage, sacrifice, and devotion of these super soldiers. But that doesn't mean things are dumbed down to disrespect diehard fans. Being a veteran of the franchise isn't essential to the enjoyment of Space Marine 2. While it might further satisfy the experience, the universe is brought to life with such detail that it makes for the perfect getaway for newcomers. And then IGN giving it an 8 out of 10, saying Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 may not break the third-person shooter mold, but it looks amazing, makes good use of its Warhammer lore, and has brutal combat that just feels great. And that last part is exactly what would summarize my last few hours with the experience. Just extremely gritty fun. Now, we have also seen amazing success so far. This is what the story is. As you can see on GameRant, it's already an incredible sales success. It's the fastest selling game ever worked on by Saber Interactive, with it having about 225,000 players in its first 24 hours. Obviously, we already have the overwhelmingly positive user and critic reviews. So yeah, this is just another great game. And it feels like entering into 2024, I wasn't really expecting much, but we've had some really good surprises so far. But this love so far for Space Marine 2 isn't entirely universal. PC Gamer giving the game a 60 out of 100, saying after a rip-roaring first impression, the long-awaited sequel quickly runs out of steam. There are a couple other reviews like that, especially from users. And myself, this is a game that I really didn't have any expectations with, and I've just genuinely had a fun time getting immersed into this universe for really the first time. I'm not really that big of a Warhammer fan, never really been too big into this franchise at all. I've had a couple of other experiences I should note, but this is my first time really giving into a game like this, and I've enjoyed it. But it is funny though, looking at this PC Gamer review score of a 60 out of 100, comparing that to what they gave Gollum. Remember that game, Gollum? A game that barely functioned and was a travesty. They give it a 64. They're giving this a 60. I find that rather astonishing. But hey, the AAA games industry, the gaming journalism circuit, they love these rather baffling scores. I swear every outlet does this every once in a while. We had Black Myth Wukong, remember Screen Rant giving the game a 6 out of 10 because it didn't have enough diversity. That was baffling. Then there was last year Wired when they reviewed Hogwarts Legacy. There is no magic in Hogwarts Legacy. They gave it a 1 out of 10 because they didn't like the outside politics as somebody that wasn't even a part of the game's development. That is what you're going to get from games media, and they do dictate how these games are made, especially with coverage reviews like this, because game developers and publishers have very much said in the past that they live and die by review scores, and really the Metacritic overall review score. So yes, a lot of these different gaming developers are trying to appease reviewers like this. So there is a reason why these games are skewed sometimes to the views of outlets like IGN, PC Gamer, GameSpot, the Access Media, the same outlets that do a lot of the marketing for these games. Now, recently there's been a lot of conversation surrounding this video coming from Asmongold. It was a reaction to another YouTuber's video, and I actually want to play a little bit of that video because I mean, that's what Asmongold was reacting to. And this is what he had to say. The first minute I'm only going to show. You can watch the rest. I'll leave a link in the description down below. But it's pretty much what I've been saying throughout this video.
So much masculinity that I feel like I've been in a desert for the last few years. It has themes that nobody wants to go near anymore. For courage and honor, for brotherhood, for the Emperor.
I mean, I do think that a lot of publishers, game developers do want to touch that stuff, but then it comes down to market research and what's popular, what's going to attract a casual audience, and themes like that isn't exactly appealing to the wider margins which so many of these publishers want to reach with, even if a franchise like, say, Gears of War started out that way, or Saints Row. Saints Row is a great example of that. What it started off being, and then the remake totally just forgot about that or ignored all of that. Because it strived for the modern audience that doesn't exist, and it never has.
It's so good. It's such a fun game. But the entire time while I was playing it, I couldn't help but shake this feeling of nostalgia. Like the game reminds me of something I've lost, something that we have lost.
Because we used to have a lot of these games. This was the 2000s. People can act like this didn't exist, but we have more games being made nowadays. But what has changed about the industry is that a lot of these executives are striving for that recurrent consumer spending, or trying to make these giant experiences that can make their franchise the next big thing. And what that does is that neglects the audience that was already there, because they usually get left behind. That's what we've seen with a lot of the beloved franchises that existed like 20 or so years ago and that have continued on, and they've really faltered.
You know, I used to play.
Warhammer 2 CEO drama for his comment on your video. I saw that. IGN posts an article, this is like 17 hours ago. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 developer Saber Interactive won't say whether or not controversial YouTube comment is from its CEO. And so if you click on the article, they changed the title of this from controversial to explaining what it actually was.
Context. A few days ago, what was supposedly the CEO of Saber Interactive left a comment on one of our videos.
I hope games like Space Marine 2 and Wukong are the start of a revision to Timeline, where games are simply about fun and immersion.
This comment went immediately viral, and as you might imagine, a lot of people were very positive about it. But then, la creme de la creme. A senior Kotaku reporter called this out, and equaled Saber's CEO to some anti-woke crusader. They were so sure the comment was fake that they asked Saber about it. Saber then refused to respond, and the smear campaign immediately begun. Then today, the CEO replied to a post about it on LinkedIn.
And the reason why is because it wasn't controversial to anybody. This is a media hack that they do. So they say that it's a controversial comment, then hopefully by a self-fulfilling prophecy, it then becomes controversial, right? But the truth is that this comment had 14,000 likes. Everybody was positive about it. Everybody was supportive. There was no controversy. IGN reached out to them, but they did not receive a response. Basically, something happens, and then this comment becomes misrepresented, and then this narrative is created. That narrative then makes the company feel like they have to set the record straight and explain themselves to these companies. Saber Interactive is making the right decision in the same way that Game Science made the right decision. It's not to confirm yes or to confirm no, it's to have no comment. You don't talk about it with them, you don't give it oxygen.
What if you told my story with Lego pieces? Lego, just be open.
I remember on the fancy studio, and Pharrell was working all of the rooms.
It's pretty simple, just learn it bounce. Discover what it takes to wrap the due to how many were sold, and I think a lot of people just really do not go on from their core game rotation of Warzone, Fortnite, FIFA, or not, whatever they call it now, FC25? I don't know.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, so, they just don't move on from that, and as a result, those were always such core franchises, especially Call of Duty. You had your Call of Duty, you had your Madden, and you had your FIFA for a long time, and it's just like, these are the games that sold every year, even though it was like the release of almost the same hit. And I think those people are of a certain age and just don't move on, and they don't see the reason to move on, because the game still comes out there. If it stopped coming out there, then people wouldn't move on.
I think it's availability of games, right? And there are those games that are just perfectly fine on PlayStation 4. Fortnite is perfectly fine. Sure, the likes of Rainbow Siege, as you say, FIFA always tends to run pretty well. So, for those type of people, why should they move on? I also think, credit to the design of the hardware. They produced a fantastic console for 2013. And if you look at what we're dealing with the PlayStation 5 and the current generation, it is, obviously there's a lot of great advantages to having those consoles, but it does require the developers to make use of them. And we are looking at fundamentally more of an evolution rather than a revolution in design principles compared to what the PS4 was doing. PS4 just got so much right. Oliver, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the PlayStation 4 is a huge platform. It sold, I think, about 120, 115, somewhere in there, million units. It's a ton of consoles up there.
What the? What the? You ain't out back. Oh my gosh. Get
why is it that Bethesda games have progressively gotten worse? And while it's a subjective question, it's not entirely incorrect. We'll be looking into that, along with diving into Starfield more specifically, uncovering its many flaws, and taking a look at the entire main story to figure out what the intention of the game was and what we actually ended up with. Then, finally, looking to the future of Bethesda. Generally speaking, games used to be more difficult, beginning with arcade games having to be harder to keep players inserting coins. And this philosophy carried over to consoles, but in a different way. Games used to be extremely short due to memory limitations. However, that time could be increased artificially, with much more difficult enemies to deal with, set save locations and limited lives and so on, requiring you to take your time and think, doing the same sections of games repeatedly, turning that 2 hours into 50 even. But developers also had more freedom to innovate within those limitations. As technology advanced and the gaming industry grew, so did the audience. Priorities were placed on accessibility and making them more approachable to the largest possible demographics. And as a result, over time, games have become more streamlined by including guided tutorials, objective markers, simplified mechanics and interfaces. While this made gaming more welcoming to newcomers, it came at the cost of complexity and depth. It is very possible to have both, of course, but for the majority of AAA titles, the focus has been placed on the side of capturing the largest market. Looking at Bethesda specifically, let's start with Daggerfall, one of the earliest Elder Scrolls titles, with a ridiculous amount of skills to choose from and the ability to set your own advantages and disadvantages that change how you interact with the game, and so much variety you're free to choose what you want to do. If you don't like one aspect of the game, do another. You're not locked into one way of playing. Its map size is approximately 161,600 kilometers. That's roughly around the size of the United Kingdom. Daggerfall is more akin to a life simulator in terms of role-playing elements and size. Morrowind opts for a fully handcrafted, rich and detailed, but much smaller world filled with unique locations. It won't hold your hand in the slightest. You had to invest. You had to learn the culture of the land you were in, the public transport routes, because there was no real fast travel. You need to read your journal to find directions to quest locations. You had to pay attention. Combat-wise, in the beginning, you are useless, to the point you may even die to the first rat you face on your journey. But as you progress through the game, you will become a god. With Oblivion, we get the introduction of Radiant AI, a system that allows NPCs to have unique interactions and behaviors, to dynamically react and interact within the world. Having different NPCs have different goals, like eat in this location at 5 p.m. or travel to the next town over and stay with a friend, aided tremendously in what Todd Howard described as an organic feel. Each of these games innovated in different ways, but also removed elements of the prior titles. One of the mechanics that is present in Daggerfall, Morrowind, and Oblivion is spellmaking, for example. The ability to customize and tailor spells to your liking. And they could be incredibly broken if you wanted. You could fly or jump across the map, become permanently invisible, create a destruction spell that looked like it could level a small village. Skyrim, on the other hand, does away with this, along with many other things, but is far more accessible than previous titles. Skyrim is simplified, but within that simplification comes a mass appeal and a much more immersive, vibrant world. Fallout 4 follows a similar route in comparison to Fallout 3. It does away with skills and has instead rolled them into perks. So instead of the ability to, for example, specialize in a more specific playstyle, you're limited just by picking perks and removing all skill-specific dialogue checks, thus removing several RPG elements. The largest and most controversial change in Fallout 4 is the addition of a voiced protagonist. Whilst vastly increasing accessibility and likely one of the reasons why it's the most popular Fallout game to date, limited many factors of what constitutes a Bethesda game. Having a voiced protagonist limits you in how you can view yourself. The inflections are set in stone, with no nuance to how you perceive your character would say things. You remove content by simply having a voice. The voice actor is stuck with the background, personality, and morality the game has set. You're limited on how much can be said and in the variety of ways they can be delivered, which is not an issue if you have the writing talent to back it up. A lot of the times you'll choose one dialogue option just for your character to say something completely different. The trade-off, however, is smoother combat. The addition of settlement building, improved crafting, the ability to sprint, and of course, having a voice. And you might like these changes. You might even love the settlement building and voice to the point you won't touch the previous Fallout titles. And that's why this is so divisive, because your love or hate of Bethesda games is more than likely largely based on your own entry point. Say you began with Fallout 3. The first time you left Vault 101, the natural sunlight blinding you, your eyes gradually acclimating, revealing this vast wasteland for you to explore. That experience sticks with you. Or in Starfield, the first time you landed on a planet, roaming its surface, that first realization hitting you like a wave, that there is nothing for you to do. Sorry, we'll save that for later. So, my introduction to Bethesda Studios was the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion on the Xbox 360. The world felt alive. Exiting the sewers for the first time is etched in my mind forever. The side quests and exploration are unrivaled to me. The bugs, the goofiness, and the fact that only 10 voice actors voiced over 900 characters was and still is charming to me. It's the one game my mom sat down and enjoyed watching me play. All of these things are reasons why Oblivion has a special place in my heart. Could I play Daggerfall? Maybe, but the scale and the idea of it being mostly procedurally generated doesn't particularly hold my attention. Could I play Morrowind? Within the first 10 minutes die to a rat because I messed up my stat investment. Return to where I died to witness a wizard screaming and falling from the sky. Loot him for some interesting scrolls. Curiously, test out the scrolls to suddenly leap into the sky and fall to my death. Spend time reading the interesting lore. Lose myself in a hand-drawn and fascinatingly unique alien-looking world. I could and have, but it's definitely a different mindset in comparison to the comfort and relaxation I feel with Oblivion or Skyrim. But then I don't like Skyrim as much for its simplifications. The point is, if you started with Skyrim, more than likely that's your favorite Elder Scrolls game. If you started with Morrowind, you might swear by Morrowind and everything else is garbage. Or you might have grown to find comfort in the later titles. It could be considered synonymous with nostalgia, but it's deeper than re-experiencing or looking back on something you cherish and then basing future experiences with that standard. We all have different definitions of what worse is or what a Bethesda game means to us. One thing, however, that is indisputable is that each new installment has has less depth.
My neighbor thinks Volkswagens are expensive to maintain, but they're surprisingly affordable. He also thinks the milk is still perfectly fine. So maybe don't listen to him. See the numbers for yourself. Volkswagen.
Okay, combo. Lots of banana peppers.
Take a photo.
On September 20th, witness the origin of the Transformers.
So let's take a look at Starfield. While this is a new IP, this is in the same vein as the Elder Scrolls and Fallout series, just a different coat of paint. Fantasy, post-apocalyptic sci-fi, and finally sci-fi. Completing the trifecta, that's really the only difference. The engine that runs this is almost exactly the same, so we're bound to draw comparisons, and I certainly will be.
You bet your ass that you're
You kidding me? Way to make a mess in front of my new book.
In Starfield, there will be a moment that completely flicks a switch in your brain that allows you to see it for what it really is. It could be as simple as going through 5 loading screens within 50 seconds, or it could be returning from a side quest to then witness your quest giver levitating into the ceiling.
There you are. You were gone for quite a while, love.
Or you're faced with a quest chain that only has nonsensical outcomes, when very clearly in your brain there is only one outcome that should really be a possibility. The purpose of video games, more specifically this genre, is to sell to you that the world you've been transported into is real, that you have your own autonomy in this virtual world, that your choices matter, that your exploration and intrigue will be compensated, that the more you put time and effort into investing in this universe, the more rich and more fulfilling your experience will be. And while previous titles hold many of the same issues, they were bugs within the system, byproducts of innovative game design due to the variety of options given to the player, along with technical limitations and taking risks. They had character, there was a sense of passion. Technology has evolved, so why have we backpedaled so far to the point that Starfield is somehow seemingly the most realistic yet least immersive of any previous Bethesda game? Starfield is stagnant. Bethesda is stagnating. Every single implementation of prior mechanics is a downgrade in some shape or form of previous titles, and each new mechanic is constrained in terms of depth. Melee weapons have less thought put into them than ever before. There are less than a handful of weapons, and I do mean that literally. The melee upgradable skills are nothing but damage boosts. You have a 3-hit combo and a power attack. That's it. There are no directional attacks that offer different ranges or effects. Daggerfall had directional attacks. Daggerfall was 30 years ago. You could argue that, technology has advanced. A fire axe won't do anything to these futuristic spacesuits, while these laser beams will indiscriminately pierce anything. But you can also argue that maybe there are some far more tanky suits, requiring strength stats to wear that mitigate lasers, with weapons that incorporate this new technology and vaporize anything in its path, or a fist weapon utilizing space hydraulics to crush anything. It's as if melee combat was an afterthought, thrown in lazily to appease those unsure why it's present in all previous games but this one. Lockpicking is now a far more tedious minigame, yet finding things is harder than it's ever been. The rewards are almost non-existent. The amount of time you spend, a minute picking a lock, to be rewarded with maybe a half-eaten sandwich is impressive. So eventually you'll get bored of even doing that, risking the possibility of maybe for once getting some good loot, just because eventually it is that boring. The faction quests are bland, which is unfortunate because some of them show promise in the beginning, just to fall off a cliff halfway through. Then we have the stealth system, somehow worse than the already terrible stealth systems in every other game. You have people noticing you from 2 rooms away or 2 floors down, companions that seem to completely disregard the need for subtlety, running all over the place, alerting everything, resulting in guards teleporting through walls to catch you when you were hidden.
I'm holding you for trespassing.
What's most confusing is there is a faction in this game based around corporate espionage, rewarding you for the more stealthy and charismatic choices. Bethesda has gone through many evolutions of how to do persuasion. Oblivion had a wheel minigame you play, picking options based on the most positive facial expressions. Fallout 3 went with RNG and raising your odds with charisma and speech skills. There were dialogue options based on unique perks you chose and your special skills, along with your current moral standing. Skyrim is really just for barter prices and a few quests, I think. Fallout 4 is entirely based on a singular charisma stat and is RNG based. And somehow, Starfield has the worst system of them all. For 2 reasons. Generally, the writing is just bad. But the main offender here is it's selling you on a lie. It looks intricate. You're given what feels like contextual lines color-coded based on success rate, tailored towards your current situation, who you're speaking to, and their personality and temperament. The riskier the choice, the more points gained. In terms of color-coded risk, this is true. But in terms of tailoring your words to who you're speaking to, that's not actually real. What's going on is you're pulling from a library of generic lines, shared with every other NPC in the game that can be persuaded, with a few unique lines more fitting to the situation you're in and the person you're speaking to. But even if these unique lines are tailored and your knowledge of who you're speaking to allows you to pick what you deem to be the most fitting choice, that invisible percentage isn't changing. There is no correlation between the written text changing any probabilities. For example, you attempt to persuade a guard to give you his security card, and every single speech option is just pulled from the give me this item generic lines folder. The argument is not that it's RNG or anything, it's that the approach taken is to fake death. These interactions aren't unique at all. Most role-playing games tailor dialogue choices, backed up with good writing. Then you can throw RNG onto that and sprinkle in some higher chances on saying things that actually make sense. Almost everything in this game is trying so hard to convince you that it's layered and sophisticated, and you're just peeling away layer after layer until you reveal there's nothing there. Starfield is a game of boxes. You traverse through hundreds, thousands of boxes in your playthrough. In your ship in space, that's a box. Maybe there's nothing in the box. Maybe some meteors or some enemy ships. Maybe an old granny has invited you into her box to eat her sweet rolls.
I've got plenty. I hope you're hungry.
And as I say that, I think to myself, why did I say that? But at the same time, that's literally what happened. So, you want to go into another box, right? Load into this planet. No, you can't fly to it. You're in a box. You're in another box now, a virtually void box planet. Spend 2 to 4 minutes running to this point of interest. You made it. You're in an empty building. New box. You look around for a few minutes and find nothing. lockpick these chests for meaningless loot. Leave that box back to the lifeless planet, then fast travel out of that box into your ship. Then fast travel out of that box into a lively city. Each lingering transition, each loading screen, groaning at you, asking you, why are you doing this? Odd. Nobody is talking to each other. They're simply walking aimlessly or standing meaninglessly. Yet they will stare at you through vacant eyes. Sometimes you may notice people's faces and bodies change if you take your eyes off them for even a second. That's odd, isn't it? They will walk by you and tell you about this interesting person on a planet far away that you didn't ask about. You are the only thing that matters in this world. Once in a while you may stumble upon two people naturally talking, but when you approach they begin to longingly stare at you, as if you're some unique, exotic animal. Maybe you're not in a box. Maybe you're in a cage. The focal point of the entire universe, eternally observed, never able to escape the confines without permission, always needing to go through the customs process before being allowed into yet another cage. There's a very distinct lack of immersion in everything, from exploration to just how NPCs function. See, in previous games, the majority of NPCs were named. Add on top of that the addition of Radiant AI with Oblivion, but that was removed after Fallout 4. I suppose I can understand why. The scale of these games can't afford to incorporate it. The cities are so large that, to make them feel lived in, you need an abundance of nameless NPCs. But that doesn't feel alive. They provide nothing to the world if all they do is roam without purpose. I get it, but I don't have to like it. Especially when it didn't have to be this way. Which brings us to the fact that Bethesda is out of touch. The creation engine is guilty of many faults with the game, but it cannot account for a loss of passion and vision, and it cannot account for always thinking bigger is better.
So they've finally arrested Sean.
2 years ago, graphics giant Nvidia caused a wave of outrage when they announced 2 gaming GPUs that had the same name, but seriously different performance. Thankfully, though, they learned their lesson from that response, and they never did it again. Sorry.
finally played The Elder Scrolls, not these games. Oblivion from 2006. I forced myself to actually play the game, not just boot it up once and never touch it again. I wanted to see why Oblivion is so loved, because my goal was to answer if this game is even worth playing. Could I have fun with it?
This is Seth from Los Angeles, California. He's one of many so-called NFT bros who spend tens of thousands of their own money on little digital images between 2017 and 2021. Pixels are fire. In 2024, most of these copy-pastable JPEGs are now completely worthless. We asked if he has any regrets. He says he's still buying. So you bought NFTs of digital products in 2021. How did that work out? How did it pan out? Oh, okay.
You all don't know about Web 3.
Seemed very defensive.